Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, our eternal thanks to everyone who helps keep this podcast going. That is our academates on the Bestseller Academy and our patrons over on Patreon. If you sign up to Patreon, you get access to hundreds of hours of extra material, deep dives into all sorts of amazing subjects. So recently we've had stuff on TikTok, on ADHD, on screenwriting, on forensics, on writing blurbs, editing. One Ian W. Sainsbury, award-winning author, takes you through how he edits his books. Who could ask for anything more? It's fantastic. So pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support if you want to support us there. And the Academy, well, we've got a new intake coming, haven't we, Mr. D? Tell us about that.
I love this time of year, Mark. I love this time of year. Beginning of September, we always have a large intake coming into the Academy. And the thing I most love about it is we get people sending these applications and telling us about the project that they're dreaming of writing, or the project they're working on that they're stuck on, or the project they've been working on for 10 years and haven't managed to finish. But I just love it. It's so fascinating seeing all the different stages that everyone's at, all with this common goal, though, of writing the very best book they possibly can. So yeah, if you've been thinking about this for a while, if it's something that you realize, you look over the last 12 months, you think, no, I've been meaning to really get on it. I wanted to get that writer habit going. I wanted to have some accountability, but it just hasn't happened, or it hasn't happened in the way that you thought it might, which is always the way, isn't it? It's like you get to the end of a year and you look back and think, where did that go? So if that's you, then the Academy will definitely work for you, because as we're going to learn actually later on about how academies and writing courses can change people's lives. We've had so many amazing stories over the years that we've been running the Academy. So pop along. If you want to pop in your application, don't be scared as well. This is not about professional writers or you have to have published 10 books. This is, if you're thinking of writing a book, it's for you. If you're in the middle of writing a book, it's for you. If you've published 10 books, it could be for you as well. Everyone's very beautifully accepting, aren't they, Mark? It's that everyone just welcomes everyone wherever they're at, and that's the whole point of it.
Absolutely. We've got people on their first drafts, we've got people who've worked on major films, we've got people who've finished books and been published, the whole kit and caboodle. So that's the Academy. So links in the show notes for that. And Patreon. Oh, I meant to say thank you to Holly Emma, who is our latest patron. So thank you very much, Holly. So if you want to be like Holly, get access to all that amazing stuff, check out our Patreon.
And I will just say, there's only a couple of weeks to get your applications in, folks, to the Academy. So go for it, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mr. Stay, you've had another adventure this last weekend. Well, I wouldn't call it a book fair.
Well, it was a food and drink fair. And it's one of these things where people were expecting food and drink. I'm not sure they were expecting authors. So you get these strange double takes. So, that was right. Sold a few books. Not a huge amount. It was all right. But and the weather wasn't great either. But I did see the Barbie movie.
Oh, yeah, you were going to report back about this. So what was your take on it?
It's brilliant.
Really?
It's an existentialist classic. It is such a thought-provoking film that more than Oppenheimer. It's really,
that's crazy.
It's asking questions about your very existence, how you identify as a human being, your role in the world. It's amazing, and weirdly as well, for a film that has Mattel in the opening idents at the front, has a right pop at Mattel as well. For basically saying, look, Barbie, for better or worse, has shaped the image of women in the Western world, particularly in the States and in Europe as well. It's a really, really thought-provoking film. And it's interesting seeing people's take, because some people have just gone in and enjoyed it and had a great time. Some people have really, really gone for it. And I've seen some really mean-spirited reviews of it. And I mean, there's one author, it keeps cropping up on my Facebook, and I don't know this author, but another author has been sharing it. And it's just like, they just went in there determined to hate it. And it did get me thinking about this. So much of our mindset stems from our state of mind, I'm not, and our success and how we do in the world. I think I'm not saying that pootling about with a dopey grin on your face is going to make you a millionaire, but I think if you allow yourself to become bitter and snarky at the success of others, it's just going to eat you up. It's just exhausting for a start, so that whole attitude is just, it's kind of, I like the odd snarky comment, but I'm not going to write a 1,500 word review about, Barbie or whatever, or something I didn't like, so it's just baffling to me that people allow themselves to get eaten up by that. It's just weird.
Well, I've always said this, Mark, but it often says more about the state of mind, the perceptions and the experience of that individual in the world than anything else. It's a revealing of their innermost experiences of the world, and I think it's I love this kind of stuff because I'm so fascinated by human behavior, why we think the way we think, how our experiences in our life shape every moment that we move forward to in life. And then from a writing perspective, how all of those experiences shape our writing. And as writers, we have to try to remain, I think, as open-minded as possible. We've talked about how we have to put ourselves in the shoes of, the most awful people's behaviors in the world, as well as the most beautiful behaviors. And to do that is a talent. I mean, you've got to be very, very broad-minded to be able to take on a worldly view about, to make your story really connect with individuals. So, but I will say, I tell you what, it sounds like my kind of film. I think you've convinced me to go see it. Do I have to wear pink? Because I've seen a lot of photos of my friends who've seen it and they're wearing pink. Is that a thing? Are there lots of pink in the cinema? There was a lot of pink. I don't think I own anything pink unless you count a Pink Floyd tour shirt. But
that
would be kind of a subtle dress
up. No, it's a really, really thought-provoking film, and people have either deliberately got the wrong end of the stick or just haven't got their head screwed on. But that's people, isn't it? One of my favorite characters in film is Donald Sutherland's character in the film Kelly's Heroes, where he's like, what's with the negative waves, Moriarty? It's just be cool. I'm starting to sound delirious because I hope you appreciate, listeners, because like me, if you listen to a lot of podcasts at this time of year, we're recording this in August, all the other podcasts take the summer off. Not us. This is episode 464. We're sticking with it, man. We're sticking with it all the way through the summer.
I know. There's no school holidays for the two Marks.
Not anymore.
Is that why the number of people listening to podcasts has gone up 10 times because everyone's off on breaks? Fantastic. Well, folks, if that's the case, if you're new, if you're hearing this for the first time, welcome. I think Barbie's quite an unusual avenue for us to tangent down. It is a bit, you do we are a bit random. Let's admit it, and that's the part of the fun of this. We never quite know what we're going to say. But if you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're in fact, there was somebody who wrote to me the other day who said they just discovered the podcast three weeks ago and they're binging it like crazy. They joined the academy. It's like responsibly, but binge responsibly, folks. But welcome, and if you're a long time listener, we're into August now, and August is Share the Bestseller Experiment podcast month officially. Mark, I just made that up.
It is
but
good.
It is.
Good,
it's official. We had a production meeting about it, didn't we, Mark, for many seconds, and it's about talking to anyone that you meet in the street, stopping random individuals, anyone that you see writing, and just leave the words Bestseller Experiment podcast on a piece of paper in a library next to them as they write, and just wander off. So we want to see people taking photos of their little Bestseller Experiment notes and just handing them to people, and then let us know. Right in, if you find somebody that loves it, that gets something from it, let us know, and we'll obviously welcome them to the podcast as well. So that's just for a bit of fun. But Mr. Stay, let's dive into this week's interview, because we have a absolutely lovely interview with AJ Pearce.
Yes, AJ Pearce, like kindred spirit, because we both write in the same kind of period, and there was so much of this that clicked with me. AJ Pearce's debut novel, Dear Mrs. Bird, was a Sunday Times bestseller. It's been published worldwide, USA, Canada, Australia, translated 15 languages, Richard and Judy Pick, nominated for loads of awards. Now she's back with the third book in the Emmy Lake series, which is Mrs. Porter Calling. And we discuss writing that difficult third book, writing for 21 hours straight, and the 3 things that every author needs.
Fantastic. So let's dive in and listen to the fascinating AJ Pearce talking with Mr. Stay.
AJ Pearce, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really, really well. Thank you. Really well. Very excited to be here.
Well, I'm very excited because we're going to be talking about the 3rd book in the Emmy Lake series, Mrs. Porter Calling, which is... let's talk about Emmy Lake, because she's an extraordinary invention and a wonderful character. But tell us about Mrs. Porter Calling and where we find Emily in this 3rd book.
Mrs. Porter Calling is set in 1943. And it's at a women's magazine. Emmy Lake is a young agony aunt working for Woman's Friend, and she's doing her bit for the war effort through helping readers. And she feels passionately about this because the women are having a tough time. Obviously, it's the middle of a war and everyone is just trying to live normal lives. And Emmy feels passionately committed to her readers, and the magazine is going well. They have a great team, lots of interesting characters, I hope, in the team. And then the magazine is inherited by a new owner called Mrs. Porter, who is, Emmy describes her, meeting her as like being hit with a powder puff the size of a dustbin lid. It's kind of, you don't know whether it's a lovely thing or it's just kind of, and she is not what she seems. Of course, Mrs. Porter is very posh, very entitled, and promises she won't change a thing, and then, of course, starts changing stuff. And the book becomes an enormous battle for the good guys to save the magazine from somebody. And I mean, in a nutshell, which clearly I'm not very good at doing, author fail, it's a story about friends just coming together and just going, right, we're sticking up for what we believe in.
Yes, I mean this was a very, very difficult time during the middle of the war, and it's lovely that, I mean, Emmy Lake, she gives people hope, doesn't she? I believe. Now, I read somewhere her middle name is Hope. Is that true?
It is, yes. I don't even think I've mentioned that in the books. I think it's just one of those things that that's the most exciting spoiler you get. I'm not selling this at all well. Yeah, she was born in 1918, and her parents called her gave her the middle name of Hope because that was what they were looking to the future. And she's a character who is hopeful, and she's an optimist, but they're several years into the war now, and people had to grow up fast then. All the people I've talked to and I've interviewed for the books, you just think, my goodness, you were doing that at 20? Yeah. You're quite extraordinary. And so she makes mistakes because she is young. She's in her early 20s, but she battles, and she stands up for her friends and for people who she doesn't think are being heard. Her mum was part of the suffrage movement, as was her grandmother. And I've always been fascinated in that sort of, it's all off the page, but mostly, what happened to the daughters of the women who fought for the vote. If your mum was, really quite political, what were you like? You weren't just you wouldn't have just not been influenced by that. So yeah, she tries and she does her best, mostly gets it right.
Fantastic. You mentioned a lot of this stuff is kind of off the page, that stuff about her family. Is that just in your head? Are you keeping that somewhere? Are you keeping it in reserve for later books? Is it a kind of resource that you think I can tap into that at some point?
I think it is lots of it is in my head. She and her best mate Bunty and the editor Guy Collins, they've been in my head for 10 years. I've been working with them, and they are really, really real to me. So when I'm coming up with a new idea for a book, the books are really character driven. So I just go back to, okay, what means the most to her? What will she really fight for? Yeah. And my editors are really patient because we'll be chatting about stuff, and occasionally I'll go, no, she wouldn't do that. And then I apologise profusely because I don't want to be that sort of person. I'm terribly sorry, but no, she just wouldn't. I really don't think she'd do that. And I don't know why I know, but she and the other ones, they live in my head. I see them almost when I haven't been writing for a bit. I see them as if they're on they're all in an old charabanc and the engine is running and they're sort of knocking on the windows going, can you get on with it? Come on, AJ, stop. We don't even know what imposter syndrome is.
Yes,
Shut
hasn't been invented yet.
Yes. Get over yourself. We're in a war. Give us something to do. So it is a bit like that.
Fantastic. I think one of the reasons, looking at reviews and things, one of the reasons people love these stories is they do give this fresh perspective on a period that we think we know well. And I think that's because you were inspired by a chance find on eBay that gave you a way in. Can you tell us about that? Yes, I mean, it's the more I talk about this, the more frightening life is, isn't it? In terms of strokes of luck, I was on eBay, and I like vintage stuff, and I suppose it was clever algorithms. The robots had realised this, and up came a 1939 copy of a women's weekly magazine, and it was less than a £5, so I bought it. And I had been writing as a hobby for a while, and I'd tried to write a contemporary romance, which turned out didn't have a plot, which is a shame. So I was trying to find something to write about, and I had never thought I'd do historicals. But as soon as I looked at this magazine, it just opened up that era in a completely different way. It was in a format that I was really used to, because actually magazines haven't really changed very much. You've still got fashion and beauty and cooking stuff, fiction, and of course the problem page. So it was this window that I felt comfortable in, and the problem page of everything just shouted at me, because that issue was, I think, from the week before the war started. Right. And so all the problems were really similar to the ones we might have now. It was always relationships or money or mothers or daughters. And so when I started collecting more magazines, the ones that were published during the war, you added a layer on top of that of problems that were often enormous, grave, awful, moving problems about loss and grief and loneliness and everything changing, but people still having these huge new challenges on top of the everyday challenges we have. And the more I read, the more I just thought I really want to write about this world. And it has a kind of, I know it's set in a specific period, but it has a timeless quality, doesn't it? As you said, the problems they were having are in many ways very similar to the ones that we have, but you've got the war, filtered on over that as well. So is this a series that you think could run and run and run?
I don't know. I'm certainly going to, obviously if nobody buys the books, if this one doesn't work, who knows? But I think certainly I'll take them to the end of the war in this particular set of books, because I think that readers have been so lovely and have come on board with them. And with each new book that comes out, new readers get involved and then go back to the earlier ones. And it feels like being a bit of a gang. And I know which characters people really care about, and people want to know who they'll end up with or if they'll live and all this stuff. So in the immediate future, I would love to take the series to an end at the end of the war and then see if I'm any good at writing anything else. And perhaps, and actually I'm hesitating, haven't told either my agent or my publisher this. Never mind, to tell them. I would quite like to leave it so that I can go back to all of the characters or some of them and in different eras. So either do prequels or sequels. And I'd hate to leave them forever. So hopefully there'll be lots more.
I know the feeling. Now, we talk a lot on the podcast about debut novels. We talk a lot about that second difficult novel, but we don't talk enough about the third. So when you're writing the third book in a series, is it like putting a comfy old pair of slippers, or is it daunting third time round? Or what are the pros and cons of writing a third book in a series?
God, that's such a good question. I feel you should be answering this, actually, because you're doing loads better than I do. It's sort of, my big mistake was thinking, if I write a series, clever old me, that's ticking all the boxes on the characters. I know them. That's going to, hey, well done, which isn't. And what a muppet. I hadn't thought, well, actually, they have to grow and develop and respond to what happened and have half a mind as to where I want them to be in the book after and all that sort of stuff. And I actually love that. I love seeing them grow up and revealing things in the books that perhaps we didn't know, or putting little tiny seeds in that may or may not grow into something in other books. And that, I think, is great fun. And sometimes you get really lucky. I write the books so that they can work as a standalone, so that if somebody picks them up at the train station and buys them, they're going to, I hope, have a satisfying good read.
Yes.
But they sit in their own individual plots, but the characters are growing and developing. And sometimes you get lucky. There's a character called Monica Edwards who had got a small role in the second book, and she just fitted into a far bigger one in the third book. So things like that, you're thanking the writing angels on that front. God, thank you, Monica's perfect. I don't need a new character. And that's not being lazy. That's sort of, I know what she'd do. I know her.
Yeah, I do that a lot, actually. It's sometimes you kind of think, I need to invent a whole new thing. And then you think, actually, what have I already got in the toy box? Let's have a rummage around. And you think, there's someone who had one line in the first book, but you can bring them forward and actually they become their own thing. And it makes you look really clever, because people go, oh, you put that in the first book. Were you thinking of that all along? And you go, yes, of course I was. But it's
I know. And it is that occasionally there's a new character in this who's only in one chapter. Horace Batley Norris. He's a wonderful man who works for the government. And I just love saying his name because it makes me happy. And as it's in one of my favorite chapters in the book. And he has to come back because he can't just have a chapter. I loved him so much. So he's sort of stuck in the sort of the casting green room, waiting for something that he might. And even if perhaps he's not in the next book, perhaps the one after that, without giving any spoilers away, there's a character that comes back into this current book, into Mrs. Porter Calling, who has been in one of the previous books. And I loved that character when I wrote them. And so I was so excited to bring them back. So that's lovely. But I think for the third one, I mean, I actually wrote 40,000 words of it and then ditched it because it wasn't working.
Right.
So I feel I'm still learning this game. I feel I'm still in an apprenticeship, and I perhaps always will be.
No, I think that's very much the case. So what was it about those 40,000 words? What is it that you'd learned that made you think that instinctively you knew that it was wrong?
Well, I had, I have hundreds of old copies of Picture Post, and which are great for the news of what was going on at the time, the issues and what mattered to people. And I had got into an issue which I think would make a wonderful novel, but it was pretty serious. And there are very serious issues in the books I write. But it was a really good learning as a writer that there are some issues I feel equipped to handle, and there are other issues that I was writing and I was thinking, this isn't the right book for this story. This isn't doing this story justice. And actually I'd have to explain a whole ton of stuff and then get Emmy to care about it. And I was up against a deadline was looming, and everyone had loved the idea, the publishers and stuff. So I just sat there and thought, I'm not the right author, or this isn't the right series to be trying to do this. And as the other thing I've learned is, whenever you say, I'm not going to meet a deadline or I can't do it, tell them what you can do.
Yes.
Don't just be difficult. Say, I can't do this, but I'll try and do that. So I had this weekend of walking around my house, pretending I was on a writing retreat with other authors, talking to myself out loud and doing the the Agatha Christie thing that your best ideas come when you're doing the washing up, crashing around in the kitchen. Thinking, okay, what does Emmy believe in? What matters to her? Would it be this? No, I've done that. That wouldn't work. We can't have that character. How about if that happens? And came up with this over the weekend and then sent it in on the Monday and said, look, I'm really sorry. I've come to a dead end on this, but what do you reckon of this idea? And luckily, it's worked out. So
brilliant.
It's a drama, isn't it, really?
It is.
All of it self-indulgent. I can't do it. But I just thought, no, you're well done for trying, mate, but you're not the right author to be right to doing this justice.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. I've been through that myself. Let's go back to where it all started, because as I understand, you started out writing a combination of poetry and Blake Seven fan fiction. Can you tell us about that?
I did. I wrote terrible poetry as a teenager. I mean, it was very sort of, everything's awful and it's not fair type stuff, which will never see the light of day. And I had written poetry as a child. I thought being a poet would be a really brilliant idea, which I still think, but I'm really rubbish at it. And I think I'd got a certificate. It may have been from the Daily Mirror for a writing competition when I was 11. I did a poem about a bus station. So I peaked really early on that front. And then, the Blake Seven stuff, we all used to love Blake Seven. And I guess that's really early fan fiction, I suppose, in a way. And so I used to, obviously, all longhand. I wrote for me and a couple of friends. We were in it because we all sort of wanted to be in it.
Yeah.
Because it was exciting wearing really cool outfits and running around a lot and shouting. And rather than being a rather boring person, being a boring teenager in Basingstoke, which is what I was. And so I used to write them, and our version was we were sort of in a Blake Seven setup, but we could time travel, which was an excuse to go and meet the Beatles because I was slightly obsessive about them at the time. And we were always in trouble. Me and my mates Bryn and Anne were always in trouble with the Federation, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Brave renegades, which of course I wasn't in real life either. And so I can remember writing stories, and I think once or twice we sat down with one of the old one of the old tape recorders,
right,
and read it out with us playing ourselves and
brilliant,
and everyone else. So I loved it. I'd still quite like to do that, actually.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. It sounds absolutely brilliant. So
I'm sure they were dreadful, but we loved them.
how do you get from there to Dear Mrs. Bird, which was the debut? You mentioned a rom-com that had no plot. Can you tell us anything about that? Yes.
Well, I was reading and still do and absolutely love them. Authors like Katie Ford, Jill Mansell, Judy Astley. And I'm a big believer in you write the sort of books you want to read. Yeah. And so my first effort, I'd been to a writing course at the Arvin Foundation, an introduction to writing, which was totally life-changing. Just, oh my goodness, I'm allowed to be creative, and I don't, I'd sneaked off from work, taken some holiday and not told anyone I was going on a writing course because I thought they'd think I was being full of myself. And I loved that you could make stuff up and people were kind about, were encouraging no matter what you wrote. So I tried to write a contemporary rom-com, and then I went on another course and had one of those brilliant one-to-ones with a proper author. I mean, real literary one. And he was very kind. And he said, so what happens? And I looked at him rather blankly. And went, well, this young woman goes back to her hometown and, I was having such a lovely time writing dialogue and characters that nothing much really happened. I think I put in a car chase at one point rather randomly because I thought that counted as plot. And, through a village, and then I thought, oh crikey, this is hard, isn't it? I'm going to have to work harder at this. So I'd done that, and I'd got into writing because this makes me sound 3,000 years old, but they'd invented emails, which that's what. And I'd found that when I emailed friends or family or whatever, I kind of liked editing it a little tiny bit just to make a story sound a bit better, probably unconsciously, I think. And so I just thought I'd try writing as an evening course and Googled it and then found Arvin. And I originally, Dear Mrs. Bird was going to be a contemporary novel. I thought, oh, what if I took 3 young women who tried to follow the advice of an old agony aunt? And then that just, the more of the magazines I read, the more I thought, no, I'm giving into this. I really want to write it set back then and really get involved in it.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And you had a friend of the podcast, Julie Cohen, was a mentor of yours. How did you get involved with Julie?
Julie's just amazing, isn't she?
She's
just, I mean, as a writer and as a teacher. I'd been on one of her courses. I didn't know her, but I went on a 3 or 4 day writing retreat, which she was heading up. And I was writing my first, what became Dear Mrs. Bird at the time. And she very occasionally, I don't know if she still does, sort of takes on mentoring projects. And she said to me, if you wanted some help, then I could help you. And I pretty much bit her hand off on that. And it's just really super lucky to be in a position where you can do that. And she saved me probably a year of going down the wrong storyline, because I put too much into that book, and she just helped me get to a place where I could send it to an agent and be in with a shot of being noticed. So Julie was she does, if ever anyone sees her giving advice or lectures or anything, honestly, grab it. Yeah. She's great, isn't she? She
is great. I saw her at the RNA last year, and she was just running up and down the aisle, and it was really energizing as well. It was really good.
She's great.
Really, really good. And you did get an agent, Jo Unwin, and I heard about a phone call where she basically said, "You're going to be a published author." Tell us about that phone call and how you got to that.
Yes, I mean, I'm a real tortoise and hare tortoise person. I'm the tortoise in that setup, because it took me ages and ages to write. And one of the things I think has been the best thing about writing is the friends you make and the other authors and people, your sort of your peer group who are also at the same stage hoping to get published. And I was really slow, and I had a day job as well, and I would write for a bit and then stop, and then in particular there's quite a sad bit in the first book, and after I'd written that, I didn't write for months afterwards, because I don't like doing the sad bits.
Right.
So I felt so bad at what I'd done to the characters. I just left it, which is, no good for getting published. And so I'd taken ages. And then I managed to get signed with Jo Unwin, who is an amazing agent. I was super lucky on that. And she had given me brilliant edit notes. And I was working on it, and I started hiding from her because I didn't think I could do it. And then she, in fact, I tried to get her to chuck me by emailing her saying, "I'm really sorry I haven't been in touch. It's not going very well, and I totally understand if you gave up on me." That's what an idiot. And she quite rightly ignored me. She didn't even write back. So just shut up and write. And then it got to near the time of the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2016, I think it was. And I thought, because I didn't know how it works and still don't really, but I had thought that the book fairs, whether it's London or Frankfurt or wherever, people go along and do the deals there. What I didn't know was that loads of the deals had done in the run up to it.
Yeah. They're just announced at the fair. Yeah.
So I thought I had tons of time, because Jo had said she was going to try to sell it then. And then about 4 weeks before, I think, she emailed me saying, "Well, how's it going?" So I lied and just emailed back going, "Well, actually, I've turned a corner. It's going really well, thanks. Be with you in a couple of weeks." And she went, "Well, actually, can you send it over now? Because I either try to sell it next week, or we wait until London Book Fair comes along. We've got to wait a few months, because let's do it in the proper manner." And I thought, blimey, I'm going to run out of money, because I was kind of, I was balancing working, and I'd taken a couple of months off.
Right.
I was freelancing, so I didn't have any clients at the time. So I thought, oh gosh, I can't really hang around if I'm hoping to get a publishing deal. I mean, however big or small, it was part of my work. And I know it's not. I don't know if it's not really the right etiquette to talk about money, but it is part of this whole thing, isn't it? If you're hoping you might earn part of your living, you've got to be serious about it.
Yeah.
So I ended up absolutely slamming through the book and editing over the weekend before Joe said it's going out on Monday. And I was away with some friends, I think, and for a big birthday. And I was getting emails from her saying, make chapter 6 funnier, make chapter 8 sadder, and just typing away. And then she sent it out to agents on that Monday, and by Friday had offers.
Wow.
So it went a bit mad.
Did that, because that's a big mental shift, isn't it? One, knowing you've got a deadline for going out to agents, but also to publishers rather, but also knowing that someone is actually going to read it. Because so often when we write a novel, we don't have a deal or whatever, we have no idea if anyone's actually going to read this, and it's all a bit ethereal and nebulous. But you knew people were anxious and it's been pitched and they want to read it. So that must put any kind of doubt out of the window. You just have to crack on with it. Was that kind of the attitude?
I think cracking on with it yes, but doubt, I don't think the doubt has ever gone. It never will. I mean, I doubt every single line, really, and worry about it incessantly, because you just don't know. You can't just assume people will like it or that you've done a good job. I still find it really, really quite scary. I'm always sort of thinking, is it good enough? But that chapter was a bit off. So it's a funny job, isn't it? It's why are we doing that? I'm doing this because it's the best job I've ever had, but it can slip away very easily because it's such it's just not a stable career. So it's a roller coaster, I think.
Absolutely. You've said before, I think authors need 3 things: passion, patience, and persistence. So is that those are the biggest lessons you've learned?
I think so, that patience, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about this industry, is that you can be any age. And I think I was 53, 52, 53 when I was first published. And some of the are wonderful writers were in their 50s and 60s when they've first been published. And so I like that. There aren't that many industries, I think, where at 50 with no prior experience, you can go, I'm going to give this a crack. I'm going to try.
It's true.
And there, nobody asked how old I was when my agent was pitching the thing. And I used to work in marketing, and I was beginning to feel, there was an ageism thing coming in on that.
I've worked in sales. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You kind of suddenly, I never thought I'd be the sort of person who lied about their age. And I realized I was beginning to keep it a bit quiet, that I was rocking through my late 40s at the time.
Yeah.
So patience, it takes forever, doesn't it? And persistence and passion about what you're writing about, because it takes ages. And if you don't love it, it's going to be a miserable thing to be doing. I mean, there are some miserable moments anyway, but don't just, it's all right if it takes forever, I think. And I not obviously if you have a deadline, but just keep going.
Absolutely.
And enjoy. Julie Cohen says, enjoy the good bits. Really, so when you write the end, celebrate everything you can. So I always think of that.
Very good advice. Is it also true that you once wrote for 24 hours straight?
Yes. Too often. Doesn't everyone?
No.
Someone said, my American editor said that to me. I saw her last week, and she's like, I think we can, let's not have you doing that. Oh, right you are. I'd left it a bit late, and I like writing in the afternoons through into the evenings, and I quite like it when it's dark and no one is around and no one's going to call or email because they're sensibly asleep. I have I think it was 21 hours actually. I think I'd
is that
gone,
all?
but it was a lot of coffee and those fizzy sweets,
Right.
sugar and coffee. But yeah, I'm gonna. My resolution for the next book is not to be such an idiot and do that.
So you've done it more than once. You've just.
Yes, that 21 hours was the longest. But I was working on this book actually, and I found what I thought might be a glitch in the plot at about 2 a.m. And you can't call an agent, you can't call anyone. And I just sat Googling on the internet, looking for the answer, and I couldn't sleep. I felt sick. It turned out it was fine, and I got some great advice. But I just kept going because I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. So that was a late one.
Wow. Wow. Now, you say this is the best job you've ever had, but I heard that you worked at Smash Hits in the 1980s.
Yes. Okay. Second best job I've ever had.
So were like Culture Club and Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran popping around for coffee? What was it like?
No, I was one of the squares in the marketing department. So I was in awe of it. Was at EMAP EMAP Metro, who owned Smash Hits and Q and Kerrang and Raw and all of those amazing, and Empire. And I managed to get a job as a marketing assistant. I'd been working on farming magazines and electronics magazines, right, which just through luck. And so I got to I used to go around to the editorial offices and just totally starstruck, sort of walk in, and I'd only be stuffing envelopes or something, but stuffing envelopes for an early issue of Empire, and putting the copy of Empire into the envelopes and seeing, names of famous people and their agents' addresses in LA, and just, it was like, this is amazing. I still think of it and think, sitting on the floor going, Emilio Estevez. As if he was going to, and just in awe of the editorial guys. But I used to do organise the badges, the cover mounted gifts and stuff. And back in those days, Smash Hits was, you'd be ordering up 1 million badges to get, because it had such
peak,
a huge reach.
Peak magazine, peak magazine.
It was brilliant. Lovely times.
Well, it's sort of come around full circle, because I think, the women's own magazines from the 30s, they are wonderful artifacts, and it's inspired you. So who knows, maybe a copy of it. I've got every copy of Empire on the shelf over there, by the way.
Have you? Wow.
And the great joy is going back and just looking at the adverts. That's it's the ads. It tells you so much about their life. So maybe one of those magazines that you posted will inspire someone in the future to write about that period. Who knows? But
wow.
AJ, this has been a real joy, absolute joy. And folks, Mrs. Porter Calling is out there now, along with Dear Mrs. Bird, Yours Cheerfully, and more to come, many, many more to come. Thanks so much for speaking to us, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been lovely.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, Mark, I love that story about the pre-war magazine that AJ found on eBay. Isn't it amazing when you just stand back? I mean, this is like life, isn't it? It's like life. You look back at these defining milestones, these moments where something which feels at the time maybe, in the moment, not necessarily hugely significant, but can completely change the course of your entire writing career or your entire life. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it just baffle you?
Yeah, if I hadn't turned that corner, if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't done, was it? I think it was Amita Parekh who, walked into I think it was a meeting of Greek people in London or something, and that inspired her first novel. It's just, these little things that come along. Of course, we're building the narrative on our heads in reverse, saying, "Oh, isn't it lucky?" But if it hadn't been that opportunity, maybe it would have been another opportunity somewhere else down the road. But you have to have your radar on, I think.
You do.
You have to have that opportunity radar, that kind of story radar going, okay, is there something in this? If I think about the two of us, I could have completely ignored your email when you said, some weirdo I knew when I was a teenager going on about robot overlords and wanting to write a novel. I'm junk that,
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is so true, isn't it? It's sliding doors. What I love about this idea of that it can sometimes be a thought, it can sometimes be something someone says, or it can sometimes be an object. And in the case of AJ, it was this magazine. And you've mentioned this as well. I mean, you write in the war era as well. You've talked about how you love to, look back at some of the pamphlets and the newspapers of that era.
Yeah.
It's really a portal into that world in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, well, as we were saying at the end, it's those little quotidian things, those little day-to-day things, the adverts. Like for The Holly King, I've got a character who's a postman during the Second World War, and I went to the Royal Mail Post Museum where they had all these magazines from the 30s, which, the people who worked in the Royal Mail and the post offices and sorting offices, they all read. And the articles were interesting enough, but it was the ads. There were these ads for like embetterment. It's okay. You're working for the Royal Mail, but maybe you want to work for the civil service. Come and do this exam. Little things like the kind of shoes that they would advertise, comfortable shoes because you're on your feet all day, and so it's all those tiny little details that make a massive, massive difference. Which makes me worry about anyone trying to research what we're up to today, because we have fewer and fewer magazines. And it's the ads. It's the those little bits of
Lonely Hearts columns. Do you remember? Right, we were looking back at. I think I told the story that I gave my daughter for her 18th. I gave her an entire stack of all the newspapers that were printed on the day she was born in 2002.
Right, brilliant.
And the thing that blew me away, like you think about pre-war, obviously everything's different, but the thing that completely blew me away that she started laughing at when she was flicking through it, she goes, "Dad, there's like a encounters section." I'm like, I was like, oh my gosh, that's true. Like before dating websites
apps.
And Tinder and apps, it used to be, and just some of the little, you get like 50 words. And it was I think this was in the Sunday Times. This wasn't like, the Sun or something. It was the Sunday Times. So it was just the way that people would present themselves in 50 words or less to try to get a date. And my daughter just found that hilarious. And I thought, wow, this is like after gramophones. This is like in this century. Absolutely mind blowing how quickly things change. So yeah, you're right. I think it's going to be sad in a way, because the adverts online now, everything that's becoming electronic, the adverts are served and disappear. They don't, there's not like, I mean, there is that great website, I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Way Back When, where you can look at any web page at any time in history. I guess that's where you might see the archived ads, the banner ads or whatever on the side.
It's all so ephemeral, isn't it?
But it is, and there's so much of it as well. Like, there are a limited number of magazines that you could put on a shelf, and by default, you go into WH Smith or your local. Weird enough, in Canada, I know it sounds weird because people are like, well, in Canada they sell magazines in the pharmacies. So we have a store called like Shoppers Drug Mart. And it's got like, all of your Tylenol and your painkillers, and then you've got your magazines and books, and they carry about like 15 books. That's it. I'm always curious as to who gets those 15. It's such a small area, but it does it does make you realize that in the magazine world there is still a limited amount of space. So only there's a filter mechanism where the magazines aren't any good, they don't last, or they become very specialist or mail order. So it'll be sad if it goes one day.
I know, and they are becoming more collectible. And things like catalogues as well, like the K's catalogue and the Argos catalogue, which are these for non-Brits, these big chunky catalogues that have everything you can want in the home, stuff for the kitchen and the bedroom and toys and things like that. You go back and look at those from the 70s and 80s, and it's like time travel. It's just amazing, the little things and the clothing and everything else. So it's they become these brilliant slices of social history. And if you're an author, this stuff is gold, absolute gold.
Yeah. Quick aside, in England we have the Argos catalogue. In America they had the Sears catalogue. This is the thing that everyone would pick up for Christmas. The kids would pick up for Christmas. I think it was last year or the year before. Amazon sent me in the post a Christmas catalogue. Like, how mad is that? Like, Amazon, the online store sent and printed a glossy, like really high end Christmas catalogue that came through the mail randomly, I think in November. So who knows? Maybe magazines will be a bit like vinyl. I don't think they'll ever go because it's like books. People have a tactile need to want to hold things, and there's nothing better than having a magazine lying around that you can pick up and look at whenever you want. So interesting stuff. The other thing that AJ said that I found interesting, and I think this would be a real inspiration for a lot of people who are struggling with their first drafts. This idea of knowing when to start over. She wrote 40,000 words and ditched it. And I loved the way that very humble in her attitude. I loved it. The way she said, I'm still an apprentice. And I think if we all take on that idea for our entire writing lives, it keeps us humble in terms of what we're doing. But how much courage does it take to know that some ideas are not the right time for the book and actually consign those words, not to the bin, but to the, what do we call it? Dead idea bucket, I think that's what we have
the dead ideas bucket in Scrivener, don't we? Yeah. It's very, very bold thing to do, I think, especially if you're on a contract as well and there's a deadline. And I love her attitude, which is she says, like, if you can't meet a deadline, but tell them what you can do. And she spent a whole weekend coming up with a new idea. So rather than just saying, oh, I'm stuck and I haven't got a solution, she said, okay, well, this isn't going to work, but I'm going to come up with something new. And it worked. So, it's, I think, as part of your kind of responsibility as an author, you need to keep the publisher informed. This isn't just being late with your homework. There is a whole critical path when you're being published. So the editor needs to then tell the production department, the art department, the sales department. Everyone has to make a change when that happens. And there's this massive knock-on effect. So the sooner you can get back to them and let them know, the more they'll love you. And there's nothing worse, and I speak from personal experience as somebody who worked in various sales departments, of authors who go, yeah, I'll have it for you in 6 months, and 6 months later, oh no, I need another 6 months. Whereas if someone says, okay, I haven't got it, let's either start again or give me a new deadline or whatever. But if someone just keeps delivering late, it has a massive knock-on effect. So for her to, for AJ to say, okay, there's a problem, I'm not the right author to write this, or this is the wrong, tonally it's wrong, or whatever it is, or you just get a bad vibe from it. That's pretty bold stuff. I mean, we do say to authors, particularly in the academy, if you feel your first draft is ropey, just finish it. But of course, you're not up against the deadline then. You're not, the first barrier to overcome is just to finish something.
Yes.
And it might not go any further than that. It might be this deformed book that just isn't going to work, but at least you finish something.
Yeah, and it builds that confidence, isn't it, for the next time that you write. Yeah. I think as well, not that we're encouraging people to ditch, a huge first draft, but, there comes a point, I think, in some stories where you end up tying yourself in knots so much that you can't see a way out. And to give people inspiration around this, and a really good analogy is you might be ditching those words, but you're not ditching the story necessarily, or the idea, or you're certainly not ditching everything you've learned through that process and all the development that you've done around the characters. That all stays. Let's just be really clear about that. It's not like you're chucking the whole project in the bin. You're just taking the output, which is actually in some ways the smallest part of everything that you've done, because you put so much thought into this. You keep that. You all of that is part of the development as a writer. But it's a bit like when you're working in a Word document or something online and your computer crashes and you lose that document and you're like, oh, it's like, I've just been writing that article, I got to the very last words. And then you have to rewrite it because you have, for whatever reason, you've got a deadline, you've got to deliver it, you've got to put it up. When you rewrite it, it's always better, isn't it? It's always better. It's more succinct. You only remember the really important bits. You know, you forget all the stuff that, and if you can't remember it, then it's not meant to be remembered. And so if we've all experienced that on some level, when we've lost a bit of work and we've had to rewrite it, that's a bit like what you might be doing. It's like you might be ditching those words, but you might be writing only half of those words. But man, those half of those words are going to be twice as good as the words you wrote before. So I think people need to just kind of remember that this is all part of the writing process, and it all adds experience and fuel to the fire. And sometimes, in the case of AJ, it can be the right thing to do. And it's hard, but I think, we don't show up to writing because we think it's going to be an easy, lovely little, fun journey. It's a challenge, and that's what helps us grow through the process.
It is. And this is going to, a lot of people listening to this, they might be working on their first novel. This is the first time they've set out to do this. It is a difficult thing, particularly for the first time. But there will come a point in your career, which is where I am, where you forget entire novels and scripts that you've written. I will go back and look through files and go, I completely forgot. I spent 8 months on that 10 years ago. Completely forgot. Yeah. And it seemed so important at the time, seemed like life or death. And, my entire career hinged on this, and maybe nothing happened. Maybe it evolved into something else. Maybe it just didn't work. I got so many of those little, and I will sit there and go, I will read it and think, crikey, actually some of that's not bad, but I can see it wasn't perfect, and I can see why I moved on from it. So I know it might sound weird or just astonishing or hard to believe, but I can tell you, there's a whole graveyard of dead projects in my files.
But that project still is a massively important part of your writing journey.
No writing is wasted.
Exactly. If you went back and you removed that project, if you could do a sliding doors moment where you removed that project from everything you'd written, you'd be writing something completely different today because of that.
Yeah,
and so that's the other thing. It's like the acceptance that we're all on this journey. Everyone's journey is unique, and we should always remember that. And that's what we try to always remind ourselves when we're doing this podcast, because we and in the academy as well, it's not a one size fits all.
No,
you're on your unique journey. It's about your own personal best, not whether you finish first or 15th or whatever in the marathon. And I think it's so important to embrace the process and all the things that happen with it, whether it's ditching 40,000 words or whether it's reworking that last chapter so it gets flowing again. It's all part of your personal journey, and just know that it's moving you to a better place as a writer. It's moving you to more experience. It's opening your eyes to new things, and it's just shaping who you're going to become as a writer tomorrow, next month, and in 3 years from now. So all really good stuff. The other thing I do have to mention as well is AJ, she did reference going on a writing course and how the writing course changed her life. And that is something that we hear so much. It's lovely that people say, hey, the podcast changed my life, or it helped me finish this book. But we hear that all the time in the academy, don't we? And the podcast and, what we're doing here is super, I think it's really important in terms of showing up to kind of share these ideas, but it is us just talking to the audience. In the academy, in a writing course, you get to dialogue. And I think that's the difference. You get to talk about the book that you're writing on, the thing that you're specifically stuck on, the thing that you're trying to build your knowledge in. And it's that dialoguing and that learning, that we see those huge breakthroughs from people that are willing to go that next step in their writing and say, I'm all in on this. I want feedback. I want beta readers. I want support. I want a community. I want mentors. I want to delve into the courses. This is the life-changing part. And it always reminds me, it's a bit like, and anyone who's ever done music, and Mark, you'll appreciate this. It's a bit like when you sit with a musical instrument on your lap, take, say, a guitar or a piano. There always comes a point where you reach your current potential. You plateau and it's a ceiling. And the only way you can break through that ceiling is go get a teacher, go take a course, go sit with someone else who plays and says, oh, have you tried doing something like this? Or have you tried moving your hand? And then you break through to the next level. And that's why I'm so passionate, and we're both so passionate about lifelong learning in writing. You will never learn it all. And unless you throw yourself into that, they even said, Mark, I've read some studies recently which just so inspire me, where they say that people who are dedicated to personal growth, personal learning, live longer. There is studies that show that the more that you throw yourself into learning at any age, whether you're 8 or 80, it's like part of the elixir of life. It's the thing that keeps us stimulated. It's the thing that keeps us going. So I'm not saying that join the academy will make you live 20 years longer, but
that's a cast iron guarantee, listeners.
Cast all your money back. But do you know what I mean? It's like, and I must say, from my own personal experience in life, I've always been fascinated by learning. I love to learn. I'm fascinated by the world. I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by things I haven't yet discovered in life. And it just gives me this urge to want to jump out of bed every morning and embrace life. And I think once you really get that, then so many of your problems go to some of the challenges you have, because there's always something exciting to learn. There's always something new to experience.
Absolutely.
In life, right?
Absolutely. You can go to the Barbie movie and enjoy it, or be a grumpy old git and gripe about it.
Exactly.
The choice is yours, listeners.
Yours. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. I love it. But folks, if you'd like to join Mark, there's so much more to discuss here. If you'd like to join Mark and I in the extended, we are going to talk about, and Mark's going to do this whole section on organising your series universe, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. So join us for that. We're also going to deep dive into the challenges of writing emotional and distressing events. AJ Pearce talked about how, sometimes you have to stop writing for months, writing the sad stuff. We're going to delve into that and talk about how you can come face to face with those difficult moments in your book and why they're important to do and how they help you grow. We're going to delve a bit into book fairs. We're going to learn a bit about the secret mystery of what actually really happens and these idea of deals being done in the run up to them. We're also going to talk about the importance of the first drafts and how not to doubt every single line, as AJ Pearce did, and how when you write to a deadline, it helps you write without a filter. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about ageism in other industries and how it doesn't matter whether you're 50 or 80 and you're writing your first book, everyone is welcome. So if you'd like to join us in the extended, just pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. Support this podcast. It's literally $10 a month or something, Mark, isn't it? A couple of copies a month. You'll get access to hundreds and hundreds of hours of extra audio that we have done for you. And we look forward to seeing you on the other side. Let's find out what's going on in the wins and the socials this week, Mark.
Well, this is talking about, I've been talking about positive vibes. This has been the theme of this episode. I had a lovely message on the Facebook group from Tracy Montague, who writes as TJ Montague. I just found out that one of my fellow midwives is a budding playwright who co-writes with her hubby and has productions on with a local theatre company. She says, after I posted about winning that poetry competition early last year, she started entering writing competitions. She says, Tracy says, I inspired someone. I have, of course, encouraged her to join up here. Yes, she should. Amazing how you don't know what someone's thinking until you ask. So, this is the whole paying it forward thing. A bit of positive vibes from Tracy there has inspired someone else, So pay it forward. Tell your friends, people. You never know where it's going to end up.
What if? Firstly, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Tracy. And this is so embodying everything we always talk about on the podcast. But here's a thought for everyone. What if the reason we show up as a writer, what if the secondary reason is we write books? And what if the primary reason is we inspire other people? Wouldn't that be quite incredible to think that that is the reason why we ultimately write? And if we had even an idea of the people that we inspired in life generally, like whatever we do, writing's one example of how we inspire people maybe. But if we had any idea of the effect that we had, and Tracy, going back to what you just said, how many other people have you inspired that you don't yet realize or will ever realize that you've inspired? It's always a much bigger group of people than we can ever imagine. So thank you for reminding us of that, Tracy, and absolutely everyone else. Think about that. It's so, so important. It's huge.
Yeah. Talking about inspirational, over on the Academy, Danny Edwards, he put up first draft, done. Now, Danny is a regular at all, the weekly surgeries that I do and the craft coaching that I do. I know Danny's been working so hard on his book. So Danny said, it was the peak that for a long while remained hidden by thick cloud, awful weather, and the distinct thought that I wasn't quite strong enough to make it to the top. But 7 months after starting, I'm done on the first draft. It's been a slog at times. It's taken longer than I planned by at least a month, but better late than never, I suppose. And just in time for a 2-week holiday where the only writing I'm planning is scribbling on my signature on the bar bill. Of course, I'm aware this isn't actually the peak at all. I've overwritten by about 15,000 words, and I already know there are a lot of revisions and alterations to make in the editing process, but I think I know what a good amount of them are, and I'm excited to chisel this monster into shape over the coming month or two. Thanks to everyone here on the Academy, the various coaching Zooms, as well as the podcast interviews, for keeping my chin up and providing inspiration, feedback, and insight along the way. I'm going to need more of it. I know that much. I hope everyone else's writing is going well. I mean, this is why we do it, isn't it, Mr. D?
It's
and Danny's top
brilliant.
bloke.
And
Love
Danny's
Danny.
wonderful. And we've been celebrating with Danny his achievements there, and again, inspiring others to get there. And Danny, you're absolutely right. It is a peak. You've got to the peak of that first mountain, and now you're standing on top of that mountain. You're looking out and you're seeing the next mountain that you're going to be going for. It's probably a slightly higher peak. But the point is no one can ever take away that achievement. And you'll never have to ask yourself the question ever again, can I ever finish a first draft? And that, my friend, is you stick that in your treasure chest for the rest of your life now, and you move on from that. And that is what it's all about. So congratulations to Danny. Absolutely brilliant.
And just to add as well, I've been lucky enough to see bits of his book through the coaching sessions and the surgeries and what have you. It's really good. It's really good. Yeah, this is something special. So I think, I'm looking forward to seeing where Danny goes with that.
Brilliant stuff, folks. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week. We so appreciate your company, and we do like to live in your ears. It's kind of like a weird profession, but the amount of people that I rang someone up the other day, Mark, who was applying to the Academy, and she said, I've been listening to the podcast for like 2-3 weeks. It's so weird speaking to you on the phone. It's like, I'm like, yeah, you can't press a pause button, can you? So thank you to everyone that for letting us in your lug holes every week and allowing us to like circle around your brain for a few minutes. We do hope that what we talked about today will bring you some form of inspiration. Thank you to our guest, AJ Pearce. We really appreciate her time and wisdom. And Mark, if people want to contact us or check us out on social media.
Yeah, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram and Threads, we are at BestsellerXP. Drop us a line. Subscribe, rate, review if you've enjoyed this, if you've been inspired by this. All subscribing to us, giving us a rating, giving us a review, it makes all the difference. And as we said at the beginning, tell your friends, stop strangers in the street, whisper in your lover's ear the words Bestseller Experiment and see what kind of reaction you get. You can tell it's the summer, can't you?
I know. Absolutely great. Brilliant stuff. And folks, if you've been inspired this week, hearing about what goes on in the Academy, you want to make it happen. It's incredibly affordable. We would love to be your mentors. Join us this September for the ride of your life, breakthroughs you probably never knew were possible. Pop on to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And if you'd like to get the email newsletter of the podcast every week, pop along to the newsletter tab on the same website. Yeah. So, Mr. Stay, thank you very much for all of the fun and laughter, wisdom and insights this week. To everyone out there in writing world, have an amazing writing week. Until next time, it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.